That's it. Any questions? Okay, so I'm Howard Rosenstein. I live in Israel, and for the past 50 years I've been involved in Red Sea diving. And this is Sea Stories, and I prepared a bunch of them for you. I hope I could do a decade of stories in the time frame, but we'll start, and I might speak quickly so we can do it all. The story began in 1966. I was a 19-year-old university student. I got out of my comfort zone and worked on a ship that ended up in Israel. And I was 1966. Whilst there, I enrolled in the university, and on a weekend outing with a bunch of friends, including my future wife, who's sitting here, Sharon, we had an overnight barbecue on the beach, and I went snorkeling the next day. I grew up in LA, and I love the sea. And as I was snorkeling, I noticed something glittering in the water. I thought it was curious, and I dove down maybe 20 feet. And eventually I found a gold treasure. Not just the gold, not the Spanish stuff. This is Roman. This is 2,000 years old, starting from the time of Christ. And they're beautiful Aureus coins. Anyway, what do you do with it? You found a treasure, 19 years old. I was, 19. And so I went to the old city of Jerusalem with Sharon, who became my partner, my anchor, and my compass for the last 60 years almost. And anyway, she's here. Without her, I wouldn't be here right now doing this show. So I had money for the first time in my life, and I took the opportunity to do something that I loved, which was the sea, and opened Israel's first diving school and diving center on the Mediterranean shore. Just like barely in my 20s. Hanging out the sign, and we got a property on the beach. In those days, people were into spearfishing. That was the big deal. So you can see the divers going down the steps, just below is the Mediterranean, and they were looking for fish. We were also exploring new sites where we can dive. Who knew? And you heard about Gaza, I think. It's in the news. Anyway, this is diving Gaza, off of Gaza in 1972 on the 5th anniversary of the Six-Day War, which is a crazy time to go diving in Gaza for sure. But we did it, and we went there, and we were looking for sponges because they said there might be some industrial type sponges in the deeper water. We didn't find sponges, but we found something else. We found a shipwreck. Nobody knew about it. So I went back and researched it because I noticed there was like a gun on the emplacement on the wreck, and we discovered the Amir Farouk, which was the flagship of the Egyptian Navy, which was sunk in 1948 by a human torpedo. In other words, a ship that had explosives that the driver jumped off at the last minute and went into the side of the boat and sank it. But the story was really at that time, just after the Six-Day War, when Israel had captured the Sinai, was the Red Sea. Now, Israel had a small port in the city of Eilat, those of you who've ever been to Israel, with some nice diving. But the big story was going down and to explore the Sinai in the early 70s. So I started going down to explore for my diving school. First, I started in a place called Nuweiba, which is right here, about an hour drive from Eilat. And then ultimately I went down farther south to Sharm el-Sheikh and the southern Sinai area. And we'll get there. Israel built a road. There was no roads even. And we followed this road, this beautiful, you can see the granite mountains in the distance and a 2-lane highway, all very basic. The first thing we saw were the local Bedouin tribes, and they're very romantic, Lawrence of Arabia and all that, but we became eventually neighbors and friends, and some of them actually 3 generations worth worked for me in my diving centers. What you saw everywhere were the remnants of war, because this Sinai is a historical battleground. It's an area where the powers of the Middle East, from Mesopotamia, from Egypt, would go back and forth from ancient times to modern times. So this is the remnants from the Six-Day War, 1967. We were just a few years after that. And they were everywhere. Even the Tiran Straits, those of you who have been diving in the Red Sea, the Tiran Straits is one of the great dive sites. And right over looking the dive sites were the cannons that were used to blockade the Tiran Straits. We were diving in a place near Ras Muhammad, and there were tanks on the shore. We would take an exploration dive. Between dives, we'd hang our wetsuits on the cannons of the tanks just to dry. Anyway, to give you a little idea of it, this is an early promotion.
Desert plain. And to the south, a great mountain range reaching deep into Saudi Arabia, across Sinai, and thence to Nubia on the African continent. Relics of destruction dot the landscape, stark reminders of the pathos and futility of war. Yet, in sharp contrast to this parched desert land, snuggling up against its shoreline is a body of water, just 20 million years old, young by geological standards, but so filled with wonderful and amazing sights, it is considered a mecca for sport divers. This is God's other world, the Red Sea.
Okay, I just want to say some of these pictures and images are 50 years old, so you'll excuse them sometimes if it's a little fuzzy. Anyway, we opened up a school in Nueva in an oasis, and this is one of our courses. It was perfect conditions for teaching. And this is the instructor is kneeling there on the left, talking and explaining the dangers that you might encounter during a scuba dive. The final danger was, please don't get overrun by a camel. And that was the base where we had our diving center. It was actually a construction site. The people who built that highway that went from Eilat to Sharm el-Sheikh, that's where they lived, and then a group of young Israelis moved in there and opened up a little village and also an agricultural base, and they were growing crops in this area. And it was the time for exploration, discovery, and we had a little van, and it says in Hebrew, the Mediterranean Diving Center. Sharon is in the middle there. She was an instructor working with me at the time. And we, by any means possible, we went and we'd explored the coral reefs. You can see this is just using a lifeboat. I mean, it was very basic. That's Coral Island, an old island that was from the Solomonic times, from King Solomon. Even amphibious. We would go drive along, say, hey, that looks pretty interesting. You know, who knew that? You know, so we just go in and jump in the water and look around. Ultimately, we found the perfect place. And this is farther south, near Sharm el-Sheikh. It's called Naama Bay. And you can see here in this beautiful bay, it's just empty. At the end of the slideshow, I'll show you a little bit of what it looks like today. But we had a little, we got a very modern World War I vintage train car dumped on the beach, on the sand. The floor for the first year was the sea sand. And that was it. But my problem was commuting because, you know, traffic in those days was very bad. So, I mean, that was our home and that was our workplace. So it took 4 or 5 seconds to get to work every day. And of course, we had a Jeep. We bought Army surplus Jeep for moving things around. We had the Sinai towing service standing by if we ever got stuck. And we had a few boats that they were literally pregnant surfboards with outboard motors. But we maintained one basic principle all through our professional career. We never, ever overcrowded the boats, ever. It was just didn't happen, right? Anyway, things were just starting to look good. I had a diving center. I had a villa on the beach. And boom, as so often happens, unfortunately, in our area, war broke out. This is 1973, the Yom Kippur War. And this is an Egyptian MiG. Oops, sorry, 1 second. This is an Egyptian MiG, and this is a sign like, you know, welcome to Sharm el-Sheikh, you know. And we were living up there at that point we had an apartment. This is the communication system that was strafed by those MiGs. Anyway, it's a story of a roller coaster, starting one place, going up, and then boom, something happens. Anyway, in 1974, a big thing happened. National Geographic contacted me and said, we've heard about this place, we want to come and do a story, and we'd like to use your services. It took me about 1 second to say yes, and the next thing you knew, a few months later, the team of National Geographic, one of its members is here right now. I want to introduce her. It's Anne Duboulay, a member of the Explorers Club, and Anne is sitting there in the back, and she's a great friend. And you can see a very sparse amount of equipment that she carried with her. With David, her then husband, was there. The leader of the expedition was Dr. Eugenie Clark, famous marine ichthyologist and member of the Explorers Club, and my mentor and dear friend for many, many years. Author of the book, Lady with the Sharks. Lady with the Spear and Lady with the Sharks, sorry. So this was the team. We got a little bigger boat for it. That's David on the left, Jeannie in the middle. The guy with the hair on the right is me, and my dad even came from Los Angeles to join us. And we concentrated on new areas to explore and to see what the diving is in. This is area, Ras Muhammad is probably one of the most famous dive sites anywhere. That was the center of our work. And also, we went to the Tiran Strait, which is, I showed you with the cannon earlier, which overlooks the Tiran Island, which is now Saudi Arabia. And these coral reefs that you see here are very famous and very good diving, some of the best in the world. So those are the two main areas that we concentrate. And the diving was spectacular. I mean, the visibility often 100, 150 feet. I'm at the surface here. This is a photograph that David took of me at a dive site called the Temple. And he's probably down around 80 feet here and shooting upward at me, and just a typical Red Sea scene. And there were sharks everywhere. We saw sharks on all, and on one very important dive, or interesting, we noticed that the sharks were all bitten up. Oop, I did something wrong. 1 second. Okay. We noticed that the sharks were all bitten up, and then we were watching the sharks attacking each other. And I immediately wanted to go down to investigate, and Jeannie held me and said, no, go into the reef, go into the reef. And then they came up to us. We were watching the courtship of male sharks attacking, or not attacking, but nibbling or love play or whatever, of the female. So because there were so many sharks, we had a problem. People wanted to start doing shark fishing, which we didn't want to do, especially in the diving areas. And we were very conservation minded. And this is just a little clip from a movie that BBC made about shark fishing coming into the dive sites.
We have got visitors. Who is it?
Trouble. It's an old rival of Howard's called Big Alex. He's a shark fisherman.
We've got people in the water.
I've been here since morning. You're driving my sharks away.
Get your bait out of the water.
He's got his hooks in the water. The sharks are going to start coming here. We got divers in the water over there, and they're going to start coming over where the ship is. We're going to have to cut his hooks and we'll get him out of here. Or else I'll just take my goddamn boat and put it right into the side of his boat. He's not allowed to fish here. It's against the law to fish here. And he's going to screw up everything that's going on here.
I was a tough guy once, you know. Anyway, after that happened, David and Anne and Jeannie were doing a story. And I said, can you help me? We got to capture what's going on here and try to get these guys out of here. So we went out on the shark lines. And that's Jeannie Clark on the left, David on the right, Anne in the background. Photographed this terrible scene. It was a terrible scene. And sent it to the authorities, the nature reserve authorities, and we got them kicked out. We put an end to it. And that's been a theme with us, is trying to protect the nature of the area. So as a result of that story, it was a cover story for National Geographic, September 1975, and it was one of the first of many collaborations that I had the pleasure and the honor to do with National Geographic through the years. These are these stories. One interesting image that was in that story is a picture that David took of me at the entrance of a cave. Nice, kind of nice picture. Unbeknownst to me, he had been selling that picture, not that it mattered to me, to magazines and other things. But he entered it into a competition, an international competition. You ever heard of the Voyager, the probe into the galaxies? So they did a time capsule. They wanted to capture life in the 1970s, and they took competition, and they wanted one photograph underwater, because Carl Sagan was a diver. He may have been a member of the Explorers Club, I don't know. Anyway, so he took this picture and entered it, and lo and behold, it won. I didn't even know this at the time. And then it was put into a book, because all the pictures from the space capsule, time capsule, were put into a book called Memoirs of Earth. So I just want to tell you people, please, that picture is in that book. I am in intergalactic space right now and still going. And you could check it out on the website of NASA. So the picture that David submitted was put in the book there. Okay, so I just wanted to share that with you. So don't mess with me, please, okay? From outer space to the depths of the sea, of the earth. This is St. Catherine's Monastery at the foot of Mount Sinai. And I got a call at the diving center one day. Listen, we got a problem. There was a flood up in the mountains. They got a pump. They don't have water. The pump is broken. We need a volunteer diver to go down and help us extract the pump. So I looked around. There weren't many divers at the time, so I foolishly volunteered. And on our daughter's first birthday, we went up in a Jeep, Sharon, myself, and our little baby, and went up to Mount Sinai. And there, I went into the well to dive. And I knew nothing about high altitude diving. I got to tell you that. That's a whole world in its own. And I was totally, we were always at sea level. There's different tables. Anyway, I went down into this abyss, quite a ways down, but I had help, a good support. I had an elevator, a Bedouin elevator, and they put me down there, you know. And as I'm down there, I look up, and it's like, these guys are looking down like, what is that guy doing down there? But I did okay. I got tangled up, and I almost left my life there. But I had a good technical team. The support team was excellent, and they got me out. You could see the pump next to my legs there. The ones who don't make it ended up in their skull room there at the monastery. And luckily, I didn't end up there, so I kept on going. Then we got a lot of different requests for media, for movies, for films. And we worked with some of the real great pioneers of filming, I must say. This is Bruno Velati. He's the one pioneer. He made one of the first underwater movies, feature movies, called Blue Continent in the early 50s, when I was like 2 years old. He came to do a thing called Friendly Monsters of the Sea, which was to de-demonize marine life, that the sharks and polar bears and manta rays and barracuda always got a bad, reputation. And he wanted to show. He said, Howard, you're in charge of the moray eel section. So he had me feeding a moray eel with a piece of fish in my mouth. Yeah. My breath stunk for about a week after that. But this is a scene from his movie, and I want you to pay attention, My Perfect Italian.
L'ultima volta che l'ho vista era lì, a largo di quella punta. Guardala, è qui sotto la barca. Beh, scendete pure in acqua, ma state con gli occhi bene aperti perché qui l'acqua è fonda e ci sono anche squali.
Not bad, huh?
Andiamo.
Hey guys, I hate to break it to you. She's 85 now on a walker. I'm sorry, but at the time she was something else. So we finally got enough money, and I brought in a few few partners into the business, and we built ourselves a new diving center, which is right over here, right on the beach. These are some of our boats that were up for repair. The old diving center, the train car, is here as a storage for the hotel. That's the one hotel in Charm in that bay. Today on that bay, there's at least 60 hotels, and in that area, maybe 200 hotels. And we changed the name to Red Sea Divers, got some fancy graphics, and started marketing and promoting all over the world. We also started building our own dive fleet with bigger and bigger boats, you know. And one day we encountered a problem when our dive boat became a dive site. So we had to float it up. These are the kind of the adventures that we would have running a diving center. We had to float it up. It's a whole story. And shipwrecks were always this thing, because you remember the movie The Deep, and the Jacqueline Bisset. The guys remember that one, right? And Nick Nolte, and it was in the Virgin Islands and on the Rhone, and they were doing made diving wrecks very popular. And we needed a wreck. We had wrecks that were sitting on the reef. We didn't have wrecks that were underwater. So we cooked up a story. We made up a story about a wreck that didn't exist. And it was Lawrence of Arabia and gold and treasure and Bedouins, and we just needed a wreck to fit the story. Usually you get the wreck and then you research it and then you find out. We already knew the story. Anyway, these are ships that came up on the reef. We helped some of them take the passenger, the crews off. One ship was loaded with cheese. Some of you know this brand. Anyway. And Charm was very remote and isolated, and all of a sudden in the local market, tons of this cheese are showing up, and one of the Bedouins came and obviously got the cheese off the ship, and everybody got so sick of this cheese that they didn't want to eat this cheese ever, and even look at a cow, I think, for that matter. Anyway, I was talking with the Bedouin fishermen, and I said, listen, maybe you guys have seen a wreck under something, part of it submerged. And they said they think out in the Suez there's a wreck. They see a shadow in the shallow water, and they pointed me in that direction. And they said, so this is Ras Muhammad, sorry. This is the tip of the Sinai, right? This is the going into the Gulf of Aqaba and the town of Sharm el-Sheikh. This is the Bay of Marsa Breka. Anyway, he says, you go around the corner here, and out at this point, they think there might be a wreck. And I said, well, give me the markings. How do I find it on the chart? And they said, no. You smoke 3 cigarettes, and after the 3rd cigarette, you'll see the reef. That's Bedouin GPS, right? So I had a big problem because I'm a pipe smoker. I got to start doing the calculations already. So I said to one of my crew, I said, take out some cigarettes and start smoking. And lo and behold, we got to this point there. And as soon as I hit the water, bam, the Dunraven shipwreck. And that was the first shipwreck that we had diveable in the Red Sea. That was mid-1970s. And they BBC made a movie about it. And this is when we pulled the Lawrence of Arabia story. Right? So treasure, and everybody's looking, and everybody's excited, and then the BBC does research, right? They're not like me. And they said, this ship sank 50 years before Lawrence of Arabia ever showed up. I said, well, I'm not sure about the timing of this shipwreck anyway, but it got a lot of publicity. We didn't find the treasure, but we did find the kitchen sink, so that was good. And bottles and plates and everything that is not worth anything. And we had many interesting visitors and guests. This is Ambassador Sam Lewis. Samuel Lewis was the United States ambassador to Israel during the peace process, the Camp David, if you remember, with Sadat and Begin. And he became an avid diver. He was a student of mine. I taught him how to dive. And he would come frequently whenever he can get away from his work. Anyway, when the peace treaty came, he was the guy who was in charge of handing over the articles signed by the Israeli parliament to the Egyptian side, which actually closed the deal. It means the return of the Sinai to Egypt under the Peace Treaty. And this is a segment that was taken by one of the American TV programs. Anyway, I'll just share it with you because this is when he tells me it's over. The party is over.
There's no time to waste. The waters where the wreck lies, beyond Ras Mohammed Point, may soon be handed back to Egypt, and word that the wreck may be Lawrence's gold ship from 1917 is luring other divers from as far away as Germany and Sweden. It's attracted the United States ambassador, Sam Lewis, too.
Howard!
Straight from the latest peace talks.
Good morning. How are you?
Welcome home.
Thank you.
How are you?
Oh, fine. I did the dirty deed yesterday.
Yeah. What'd you do? You gave it away.
Gave it away.
I choked
listen,
the
but
ambassador.
Listen. It's 2.5 hours late finishing. You heard that.
What was
That's
the
why I
reason?
got here at 2 o'clock in the morning.
It was on the radio, though.
I spent 2.5 hours trying to persuade them
Ras Mohammed.
to stick the line a little further west.
Did you? Did you
I
succeed?
did. No, I failed.
You failed.
But I really worked at it. 2.5 hours, we had 200 people sitting out there waiting for the ceremony, and the sun was getting lower in the west, and there I was arguing for your damn dive sites.
And it didn't work.
Well, maybe we'll get it next time.
Yeah, you think so? But did it go okay? I mean, were you pretty, in the end, it worked out okay?
No, it worked out fine.
Yeah?
We had to talk to Sadat and to Begin on the phone and straighten out a few last-minute problems.
Really? You think I'll be able to
For
operate
3
it?
years, anyway.
For 3
Okay, so this was a new stage in my life because we were obviously on our way out, but it was an interim period of a few years where we could still operate. And I got involved in what I call diving diplomacy, trying to assure that this area would continue where we had taken it with nature conservation and also the ability for divers to access and continue to dive. A key figure in that was Jeannie Clark. With her charisma and her capabilities, she actually ended up meeting with Anwar Sadat in Cairo and convinced Sadat to send a delegation to Sharm el-Sheikh even before the Egyptians took over. And here she is arriving at the border. I met them at the border. This is the Egyptian. CBS came out with Bob Simon and covered this thing. It was part of a diplomatic effort to assure that we would be able to continue working. And here I am talking with the Egyptians at my diving center with maps and explaining about the potential of diving tourism and nature conservation. Shortly after that, they had a summit in Sharm, right next to my diving center. And you can see that's Menachem Begin, the Israeli prime minister, and Anwar Sadat. And it was more of a photo op, I'll say, than really a negotiation. But at the last minute, they realized, the organizers, and Anne was there at the time, that they had a site for the meeting, but they didn't have chairs and a table for them to sit at for the photo op. So they said, Howard, go over to the diving center and get a table and a couple of chairs. So I go running, and we had these rickety bamboo, and I just sitting there praying that Anwar Sadat or Begin wouldn't collapse on one of my chairs, and we'd be the brunt of an international incident, Okay, this is the coverage at the time, and pay attention, it's quite interesting. Many of you know of Bob Simon, who also was the anchorman in Israel, and also I taught him diving as well.
There aren't many places in the world you can slap an air bottle on your back, go down 30 feet or so, and watch the sharks go by. In fact, just about the only place you can do it with some hope of living to tell the story is in the Red Sea off Ras Mohammed, the southernmost tip of the Sinai. And even here, divers are afraid they might not be able to do it much longer. The sharks living off the coral reefs here are among the most accessible in the world to scientists, to photographers, to intrepid divers. Up until now, at least, they've been very friendly. But this whole area, all of the Sinai, is in the midst of a political transition right now, and believe it or not, the sharks are caught up in it. For the last 12 years, the sharks have been swimming in Israeli waters. They're about to become Egyptian. Anwar Sadat is gradually regaining control of the entire desert and its territorial waters. Israel is giving up what it conquered by force and what it learned to love and protect. The Israeli occupation may have been controversial politically, but ecologically it was a masterpiece. The Israelis set up nature reserves. They passed and enforced tough legislation protecting wildlife on the sands and in the sea. As Americans were instrumental in orchestrating the peace between Egypt and Israel, Americans are getting involved now in pressing for continued conservation, particularly of the magnificent coral reefs off Ras Mohammed. Marine biologist Dr. Eugenia Clark, professor of zoology at the University of Maryland, is spearheading a campaign aimed at convincing Sadat that what he's getting under these waters is worth taking care of.
The Egyptians don't have a conservation program developed yet. They are very much aware of the problem, and they're starting to develop it, but they're like just infants in this field, and the Israelis have really worked out all the problems. They don't allow spearfishing, they don't allow any abuse of the reefs and marine life, because people come out here and they think each person wants to take back one shell, one piece of coral, one shell. They think, what harm is that? But when you get thousands of people coming to one area and picking off the prettiest shells and corals, you have nothing left in no time. I think it's the most beautiful place in the whole world.
Dr. Clark went to Cairo recently to take her case to the president. Sadat responded by sending a small team of Egyptian officials, scientists, and scholars to Ras Mohammed, the first such trip made overland in almost 25 years. They were subjected to 3 days of well-intentioned Israeli propaganda on how they, the Egyptians, should take care of their land and their world leader. Anwar Sadat receives a lot of petitions. Here's a lot of pleas. This is one he probably hasn't heard before. Save the sharks. Bob Simon, CBS News, in the Red Sea.
1 second. Oh, did I turn that light on? Hello? Is everything okay? Okay. So amongst the other guests, some of the more colorful ones we had the pleasure of taking care of. Could somebody turn that light off, or can you turn that light off? Spotlight? Oh, okay, sorry. No, it's okay. Okay, I'll smile. Okay, it's okay. So we had some very colorful and interesting guests. This one came frequently to dive with us. Every time after giving a concert in Tel Aviv, you might recognize him as he was the conductor of the New York Philharmonic for many years, Leonard Bernstein. And he loved diving, and he'd come down, and here he's conducting a concert to the Red Sea reefs. Once again, disaster strikes. A ship ran right aground on the reefs at Ras Mohammed, and they were starting a salvage operation, and it was destroying the reefs. So we started a campaign contacting all the people we knew, the diving diplomacy community, and we tried to put a stop to it. This ship was sitting right on the most beautiful dive site in the Red Sea. You could see the anchor. That's Jeannie coming down the anchor. We took pictures, and we started a campaign to get it removed, and we put an end to it. Ultimately, the ship sank in a storm down to about 600 feet. And except for a bunch of toilet seats on the bottom, which belonged to the cargo, everything has been removed from there since. Also, this BMW was decided to get a car wash at the time, and there you can see it as well. Anyway, it was a new age. Egyptian flag, Israeli flag, hopes of peace, accommodation, cooperation. I had an opportunity also to go to Cairo and to plead the case of conservation and continuous diving access at a meeting between the governments. And I spoke at the United States Embassy Cultural Center to a couple of hundred young Egyptian divers. It was quite historic and quite emotional, I say. And we took the opportunity, feeling a little confidence, to be able to go beyond the borders. And here we are. The border was here then at that time, and we snuck out with the American passports and the whole thing to the other side, as we call it, the other side of the Gulf. This is the Gulf of Suez, and we went to Shadwan Island and Abu Nuhas. And these are areas that were unexplored at the time. And we found a shipyard, a graveyard of ships. And we dived some of them maybe for the first time ever. And to dive, those of you who don't dive here, A shipwreck is a wonderful sight because it's a time capsule, and in the Red Sea, especially shallow ones with a lot of light, it's teeming with life and fish and corals, and here I am inside one of these wrecks just photographing. A storm came up and we had to hide, and we went behind an island called Shadwan Island, and we anchored there in the shelter of the island. 10 years before, an Israeli commando unit took out an entire Russian radar system right from that island, only 10 years before. And I thought, here I am now, diving in this area, in peace coming, in these sites. We essentially, and this is important for me to say, turned an international or historic battleground into an international playground and destination. And that's one of the great achievements, I think, of this generation of pioneers who went down there and flipped this place from a battleground to a playground. And now the Egyptians are coming. I'm pointing out the diving sites on the maps. These are the areas that should allow for diving, this protection, and no spearfishing, no shell collecting, no coral collecting and stuff. That's an Israeli colonel, a Navy colonel on the right, and 2 Egyptian officers on either side of me. Anyway, peace is coming to the area, and to assure that peace, there was a thing called a multinational force of observers, MFO, and they were made up of countries that had peaceful relations with Israel. It's not the UN, but it's an independent body. This is the 82nd Airborne landing in Sharm just before the turnover. And just to give you an idea of the class of cultures, this is a local resident welcoming the 82nd Airborne as they're marching from the airport to their base. And that evening I gave a slideshow to all the troops and talked about the area and encouraged them to open up a diving school and to get involved. And my little son, Nadav, he was maybe 4 years old, was at my side. I'm giving this show. And these guys, the 82nd Airborne, they have this kind of, when they welcome somebody, it's like a grunting something. Terrible. My 4-year-old was traumatized to this day because of that thing. And I said, it's okay, Nadav, it's okay. Anyway, I gave the show, and then National Geographic did a big story on the Sinai withdrawal. There's a cut off there at the bottom, but was a family picture. I'm somewhere underneath it with my kids, and we were snorkeling. Daria was like maybe a year and a half old at that time. And I said at the time, because I was fearing that it would be overdeveloped, and I said, tell the world that it will never be the same, it will never be the same. And we had that period of time, and they're not being disparaging. It's just that's the way culture is, that's the way society is, that's development. Anyway, this was the little town that was built out of nowhere in the Sinai called Ophira, that's Sharm el-Sheikh. You can see the magnificent setting, granite mountains. You see the fossil reefs. There's corals in those cliffs on the bottom of it, and the Red Sea just below us, and that's where our home was. And it was packing day, and we got all our things. Our Bedouin workers helped us load up the truck, and it was kind of a sense of deja vu that our people had been. This is the lowering of the flag, and our people had been leaving the Sinai before, right? So it was a return, But I'm a stubborn guy, and I was determined to continue working. And I got a special permit because of my history there to operate what they call a liveaboard boat, and I formed a new company. It's called Fantasea Cruises, and that was our graphics there. And I bought an old yacht, and I converted it into a dive boat. And there was no infrastructure after 1980. It was very little, nothing at the time. And I converted this into a floating hotel for divers. And we started to explore it and farther afield, because we had bigger boat, we can go farther afield. And ultimately, a nice 125-foot liveaboard called Fantasea 2, which had ocean-going capabilities, and we started going all the way down the Red Sea, exploring the entire Red Sea. So this is a story that was done also by National Geographic, with David being the photographer, and we went all the way down from up Eilat, Sharm el-Sheikh, the Egyptian coastline, the entire Egyptian coastline, into Sudan and Eritrea and Yemen and out. Now, if you're following the news today, you know that down that area is very dangerous today. Shipping is blocked. But we were exploring these places. Nobody had been there. Nobody. I mean, underwater. Anyway, it was the cover story for National Geographic. This is 1993. We were harassed. This is an Egyptian helicopter harassing us, coming over. All the wetsuits ended up in the water. We went aground in Sudan, and this is a boatload of Israeli and American international. Barbara Walters' husband was on the boat at the time. And the Israeli Air Force did an air-sea rescue mission, the farthest ever done, refueling helicopters in midair. And they got to southern Sudan, pulled the guests off. The crew refused to leave until we can get it refloated by a tugboat and salvaged. So we managed to survive that. But this is not the way you want to end your diving holiday, right? Anyway, we kept on going south. The Red Sea was a little hot at that time, militarily. So we went down to the Seychelles Islands. And we started the first liveaboard operations there. And we explored this wonderful place called Aldabra atoll. It's like the Galapagos of the Indian Ocean. And this was the route we took, going through the Bab el-Mandeb Straits around the Horn of Africa and diving, coming to the Seychelles, going out to Aldabra, which is way out here, and then going east to Diego Garcia. That's where the Americans have this big base. You don't want to dive there, by the way. Believe we learned. Anyway, we worked that area for 7 years. It was exciting exploration. Once again, the Red Sea, then down into the Indian Ocean. On the way back, we stopped in the Red Sea a little bit to see it. And this was Sharm el-Sheikh when we left it in 1982, just for a comparison. So when I was apprehensive about maybe creating an ecological monster, I plead guilty, because this is what it is, and it's even more so today, even more so. So what does a dinosaur do when he's getting old, right? I'll tell you what he does. He writes a book. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the show. Oh.